expiry as traders move their positions into the March contract. CBOT soybean oil and meal contracts are all down as uncertainty about China-U.S. relations continues to weigh on the market. Also, the possible U.S. government shutdown is weighing on the commodity and equity markets. The loonie is weaker this morning, which is limiting losses for the canola market. In the U.S. markets, the January soybean contract is down 8 cents to $8.86 per bushel. The market is nervously watching weather in South America, which may be improving enough to give crops there some yield-boosting rains. And another case of African swine fever was reported overnight in China. U.S. corn futures are stronger this morning. The March contract is up by less than a cent to $3.76. South Korea purchased 65,000 tons of U.S. or Brazilian corn overnight. U.S. wheat futures are down this morning. The March contract in Chicago lost 10 cents to $5.14. Kansas City is down 7 cents to $5.03 per bushel, and Minneapolis March wheat fell 2 cents to $5.66. Ag Canada is predicting wheat production will increase by nearly 1 million tons next year. And Russia has decided not to curb wheat exports. However, their export pace should slow down soon. That's a look at the ice futures, canola, and U.S. markets for Friday morning, December 21st in Winnipeg. From Markets Farm, I'm Ashley Robinson.
The end of 2018 is a perfect opportunity for you to save big. Visit Butler Farm Equipment in Fort St. John and take advantage of 0% financing or choose cash back on current year New Holland tractors and equipment. It's out with the old and in with the new. The New Holland year-end celebration ends December 31st. So hurry into Butler Farm Equipment in Fort St. John now. For commercial use only, customer participation subject to credit qualification and CNH Industrial Capital Canada Limited approval. Standard terms, conditions, and other restrictions apply. Down payment may be required.
The opinions expressed during this show do not represent those of this station. If you've missed any of this show, you can follow the podcast at Energeticcity.ca. Now, an in-depth look at the news and information shaping our community. This is Trev Talks with your host, Trevor Boland.
Whatever you say, make it good.
Oh, okay. Good morning. Welcome to this. Actually, it's our Christmas edition of Trev Talks. I'm not very festively dressed. I was going to wear a hat and I forgot. But you know what? It's our wrap-up season. So last week we had MLA for the South Peace, Mike Bernier, with us, and we talked a little bit about what was happening in the 21st. And of course, that happened yesterday. So today we're joined by both Mike Bernier and Dan Davies, MLAs for the North Peace and the South Peace. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good morning.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas is right. Are you? Did you guys get this snow yet in Dawson, or is it coming to you today?
No, I got a lot of it. Yeah, had to shovel a couple of times. The roads and everything are pretty crazy, so everybody better be safe out there.
But you know what? The nice thing about being an MLA now and not being the mayor is the roads around Dawson aren't your fault anymore.
Well, and the weather is a federal responsibility now.
Well, in that case, then it's never going to get better until that election happens. So
right.
we'll get more into that. Dan, you're with us. You can hear us well?
Yes, good morning. All the way live from the side of the road here in Boston Bar.
Yeah, you're on your way to an area with no snow.
Well, I'll tell you, boy, I drove the Pine Pass last night, and it was certainly not the greatest of driving conditions, but she's not too bad now.
Good. So yesterday was a big day for you guys. So let's get right into this because we were messaging about this. I'm not going to say what our responses were because you know there's things I'm allowed to say on air and there's things that Adam won't let me say. But huge day for you guys yesterday.
It was a fantastic day, absolutely fantastic day, and I'm not going to rub this in my wonderful colleague from Peace River South, but you know, Peace River North had a resounding turnout, good turnout, and a resounding no to proportional representation. And if I looked at the numbers correct, I believe that we had probably the strongest say out of the entire province.
Well, and I checked today. I think we were somewhere around 86% for Peace River North, which was, according to the list that came out yesterday, was the highest no in the province.
Yeah, and you can rub it in all you want, Dan, in this case, because hey, I'm okay with this. Resounding in the North Piece, but guess what? The South Piece was second highest in the province at 85%.
Oh, it was? So within 1%.
Yeah, there
North
you go.
Piece and South Piece were the strongest voices in the entire province, which is what we were hoping for. So I think Dan and I, first of all, should say thank you to everybody who took the time to get out and vote to keep the system the same. That's really important for rural BC.
Well, and you guys must be, you guys must be extra proud because, between Facebook and your meetings and public open houses and all these different events, you guys really hammered home, what your feelings were on the PR referendum and what you feel was best for your constituents. And it worked. It was two local politicians, right? Two MLAs, basically beating the pavement to ensure that people knew what they were up to, and that's huge.
Yeah, and there was lots of support out there by so many groups, other local politicians. Bob Zimmer was great. He understood as well and supported this right from the get-go to remind all of us that those rural voices and our input is so needed in Victoria, and heck, we did not want to lose that.
No, that's phenomenal. So that's good. So, that's done. It's now going forward. We see a lot. You know what I see a lot lately with the whole protesting coming out of Alberta right now. And it's interesting because they've got an election in October, which is, of course, a lot sooner than what our provincial election could be. Maybe. However, maybe, right? So I was reading yesterday that the Greens have nominated a candidate for Nanaimo, and as have you guys, and now has the NDP. What date are we looking to that by-election?
Well, I don't know if Mike would agree with me or not, but I'm pretty sure we're probably on the same boat here. Premier Horgan had stated that he wants the candidate in place by the budget time here this spring. So that would put him calling an election, in the first week or so of January with a, end of January, early February election date. Now, when you start looking at how things are going, we do have an incredible candidate. Mike and I have both met Tony a few times. Really strong candidate, 8th generation Nanaimoite, very popular businessman. So you start looking at that. You start looking at how the proportional representation is going. You just look at, you look at the last 18 months that we've had of this government, and, their track record isn't that great. So I'm wondering now, and maybe Mike can chime in, I wonder now if Premier Horgan's going to call an election in January. He may wait until after the budget because, of course, the budget is the only confidence motion there is. So I wonder if Premier Horgan is going to call an election. What's your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, well, interesting with three politicians here all talking about Dan says it's okay to chime in because I think we'd all chime in.
Well, we said that earlier. Adam's like, how are we going to tell who goes first? I'm like, really? You know what? There's no way we're going to do this because it's all about who's jumping into the line.
No, me first.
Yeah, exactly.
But as usual, I agree completely with Dan. This situation in Nanaimo, great candidate, great opportunity. I'm looking at trying to read the tea leaves a little bit because if you look at the confidence and supply agreement between the NDP and the Greens, with them both holding their nomination meetings to get their candidates in the last week, to me, that sends the message that they're ramping up and getting ready to call the by-election. I would think they're probably in the back room, in the war room, second-guessing and looking at all the different dates because of the PR results, because that will make things different. But at the end of the day, if they don't fill that seat from Nanaimo, as Dan will remember, there were two situations last session where there was a tie in the House and the Deputy Speaker had to break the tie.
Wow.
They can't afford to do that much longer. At some point, if there continued to be ties in the House on issues, you would think the Lieutenant Governor or the Premier would have to do the right thing and call an election and say this is not sustainable. So there's a lot of pressure on him to fill that seat in Nanaimo. And, of course, being in government and choosing when that date is, he'll be looking at the polls and the right opportunity to hopefully get the outcome they want. But if I was a betting man, I think Dan's right. Probably end of January will be the date, probably called the first week of January.
That's going to be interesting. That's going to be something we need to follow. And I don't. It's either the NDP or the Green. I think it was the Greens. They've nominated the former mayor's daughter.
Oh, an amazing candidate for the Greens. So the former mayor's daughter, who is a bit of an icon for Nanaimo, and she's very well known, very well respected. In fact, she ran for the Socreds. I think she was a Socred MLA back in the 90s.
Wow, really?
Under the NDP government. So no slouch at all. And so you start looking at that and say, okay, the Greens are in it to win it.
Yeah.
They're saying they are. We have, by far, I'd say, the best candidate.
Well, yeah, and I've researched your guys' candidate a little bit, and seems like a really good guy. Like you said, well-liked business guy, and I mean, he's already pounding the pavement. He's already hitting doors, which is impressive to see right out the gates. It's nice to see somebody that passionate about wanting to win.
Yeah, and this will be, I don't know, maybe Dan will agree with me on this one. It'll be weird saying this, but in that riding, it'll be the candidate that wins, not the party. And I believe that Tony's resume, with him pounding the pavement and his the love for the community and the people that love him, he doesn't need to be, and probably it'll hurt him down in that area if he's waving the BC Liberal flag. In fact, he should be talking about himself, and I think he'll have success that way. Now,
when was the last time the BC Liberals won that seat?
2001.
So 2001, held the seat for one term?
Just one term. That was that slaughter of 77-2
wow.
in 2001.
Wow.
The BC Liberals won every seat pretty well.
Yeah. And that was the big ramp up at that time, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's going to be one to watch. So that could happen. So give the folks an idea. So BC Liberals win the Nanaimo seat and say they win that in the end of January or February or prior to the budget session. What do we expect to see from that point forward?
Well, I would, my guess is, like, we'd be tied. Like Mike said, you can only go so long on a tie, and especially once you, go into committee. Of course, everything with the budget, or not into committee, into estimates. Everything's, if we have, or if they have their chair, well, it's going to be pretty hard to pass things through committee. So I think if we do win, maybe I should be saying when we win the Nanaimo, I think that the writing will be on the wall that it is just a matter of time and short order at that we will be in election mode, because there is no way that you're pretty much at a hung parliament, and it just will not function. It's not going to be good for the government. It's not going to be good for British Columbians to keep going like that. So, like I say, if we win the Nanaimo, we will be, my guess is, in an election prior to this summer.
Yeah, well, just for the listeners, Trevor, I think a lot of people up here actually know this. They follow it. But when we do the math, there's 87 MLAs. You've got the Speaker in there right now. So we have the BC Liberals got more votes in the last election, and we have more seats in the House right now as a party. So we have 42 seats. And the NDP have 40 right now in the House. So if we win Nanaimo, as Dan said, we go up to 43, and the NDP at their 40 with the Greens at 3, every single thing is a tie.
That's going to be...
Nothing can move through the House. That would mean the Speaker, Daryl Plekas, which...
we've all seen him in the news lately.
We've all seen the chaos that's happening there right now.
Yes, we have.
But that would mean...
Daryl Plekas, never heard of him.
No. pretend like he was never what he once was.
That's right. But Daryl, the Speaker, would have to vote on every single thing that came in front of the House to break the tie. Historically, the Speaker votes with government to move the debate or move things along. But typically that's here or there, little times. This will mean every single thing. That's not doable. And as Dan said, if we win Nanaimo, this is probably the most important by-election in BC history, because this by-election could actually trigger a provincial election just by one seat.
Which it should. You know what? I mean, and the governor needs to be able to see that too, that when you're going to have 43-43 and it's left up to the Speaker, and I mean, nothing against the Speaker, but we've got a guy who was, a BC Liberal and then, crossed and became a Speaker, and now he's the tiebreaker. And the question I have is yes, he's supposed to decide to move things along, but does he still have the Liberal beliefs, or has he changed his complete beliefs to be more in line with the NDP?
Well, I look at it and wonder what beliefs he's actually ever had.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if you look at his performance just in the last, the last few weeks, during the LAMC meetings and the Finance and Audit Committee, yeah, he's all over the place. So, yeah, I mean, like Mike said, I'm not sure where he's at.
And it's interesting. So the way I look at this referendum, I don't look at this as a PR referendum. I look at this as a popularity contest for the party. So you've got the Greens that have been begging for PR to happen. And I'm going to say begging because anything you read on Weaver's Twitter or Facebook, it is begging. And you've got the NDP then in a solid agreement to also support PR. And then you've got the people of British Columbia saying, no, we don't want what the NDP and the Greens want, even though it was a campaign promise, even though you've promised us that it's going to be better. The people have very much been loud and clear and said, no, we do not support what would be a disaster of a NDP Green coalition going forward in future years.
Yeah, and, it's out of 87 ridings, only 16 ridings did vote in favor of proportional representation. If you look at, even Sonia Furstenau, big supporter, promoted in a held Green riding, did not win her own riding as far as proportional representation goes. If you look at Andrew Weaver's riding, I mean, it was almost tied. I think he had 53%, right?
Wow.
So, I mean, it's across the province. I mean, people, I think, looked at this for what it was and made a good choice. This was nothing more than a political stunt to cement the Green. I mean, this was all about power. This was about giving the Green Party power. It was about keeping the NDP and keeping Premier Horgan in power. I think this was more about that than it ever was about what's best for British Columbians. And I think British Columbians came out and saw that as well.
Yeah, in all fairness, Trevor, I think we should look at the fact this referendum in a lot of ways was not really about PR.
Agreed.
It wasn't about proportional representation because in all fairness, there's a lot of people out there that support PR in different parts of the province. And there are a lot of people that understand that there are also flaws with our existing system. But this referendum turned into a referendum about process. It wasn't so much about the policy, unfortunately, because there's a lot of people that I know around the province who have messaged me who voted NDP in the last election, who voted against this referendum. They said they're strong PR supporters, but the government was so flawed in their process that they could not support it because that's not how democracy should work. So I think, and I'm hoping, this will be the final nail in the coffin on this discussion for many, many years because this is the third time there's been a referendum. This time it failed with almost the exact same percentage as the one in 2009.
Yeah.
And so are there people out there that want to change the system? Of course there are. And that's our democratic process and their right to do so. But this referendum, I think, turned into more of a vote against what was looking like a political stunt, not an actual change for our democratic process.
I agree, and I agree with you 100%. I love that you brought that up. So I'm a big comment reader. I don't comment on a lot of stuff unless I get called out or unless I see something that's just not right. Where then I believe I have to correct it. You guys know what I'm like. So right, it comes down to my opinion. But I've been reading a lot of comments lately, and it's funny because I think if an election were to be called, I think we would find the Greens would be, even more decimated than what they are going forward after this PR referendum. But I also see the NDP have lost a lot of their strong old school supporters with different things that he's done. And that's going to happen. Any politician's going to make a choice that somebody doesn't like, but you kind of go, okay, the guy did this, but he also did this. But it's not coming across that way. People are absolutely furious, and I'm reading most of them in the South, and they're absolutely furious with some of the decisions that the NDP have done. They're furious because the Greens have not stood up and said, "Hey, wait a minute," you know, and especially Andrew Weaver. I mean, we've got a guy who was in favor of Site C and then against Site C. We've got a guy who sat there and told me the importance of natural gas and doing resource exploration right, and now he's against that, and it's like, you know, so at what point in time do his, you know, followers or supporters go, "Okay, wait a minute, you are not the guy that we elected just 16 months ago. You're not even close to the guy we elected 16 months ago."
I know, and I'll let Dan comment in a second because I know he'll have an interesting opinion, because Dan actually sits right across from Andrew Weaver in the House, and for the first term, I used to
as painful as that is.
Yeah, in the first term, even more painful, Dan, I sat right next to Andrew Weaver.
Oh, wow.
In the House for, before I went in the cabinet, so for about 18 months I sat next to him. Andrew has changed. I've known Andrew Weaver for about 15 years, and did some work with him actually back in the days in the Gordon Campbell government around Site C, the climate change file, and everything. In fact, you know, I got a picture of, as most people know, Andrew Weaver standing with me, Gordon Campbell, and others at the announcement for Site C. Andrew has drank the Kool-Aid, and I mean that somewhat with respect, in the sense that he's puffed his chest out. Every single thing that he has said he's against, he's waffled on at the end of the day.
Yeah.
He said, and people know this, how many times did he say, if Site C continues, I'm taking down government.
Yepers.
If LNG happens, I'm taking down government.
Yeah.
If PR doesn't pass, I'm taking down government. If we don't get ride sharing the way I wanted, I'm taking down government. And every single one of those didn't happen, and every single time he turned around and backed away from his threats and his promises. So nobody takes him serious anymore. But more importantly, I think neither do his supporters.
No, I agree. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is that he keeps using, he goes, and he would always refer this back to the, you know, how proportional governments would work. I found a compromise, and it's like, well, no, you know, it goes back to the whole, at the end of the day, all Andrew Weaver was, his big goal at the end of the day was to win proportional representation.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I told Andrew a few times, and I know a couple other, you know, he would have found a compromise to log Stanley Park to get proportional representation.
Oh, agreed.
But,
yeah.
of course, now that that's changed, you know, and you're right, I was reading a few comments, you know, last night and this morning on Sonia's page and on his page and Adam Olson's page. People are really upset at the Green Party because, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, the Green Party, you know, they have a platform, and people vote for that platform because they believe in it. But Andrew Weaver and the Green Party, they have voted 100%. Every single motion that the NDP have brought forward, they have voted in favor of and passed it as a bill. Whether that be the LNG that they were against, the Site C, you name it, like every single, they have sold out their entire platform. And I think people are going to be looking at, like, why are we going to vote for you?
That's interesting.
It didn't do them any favors at all.
No, and to hear you put it like that, the fact that they sat in the House and actually voted in favor of Site C, LNG, tax breaks, you know, all these different things that were, both parties were so deadly against for so long, it just surprises me that he could actually sit there and vote in favor of that.
Absolutely. And like I say, I sit across from him, and, you know, it's almost like Heckle and Jive. Like, it's just, you know, one time he's this, and then the next time he's that, and then he's this, and he's that. He's all over the place. And, you know, it's, and people see that.
So
you know,
this is one of the things, though, Dan.
Your voters.
Do you actually think, in what you're saying and what we're talking about here, Trevor, that he will do anything in the short term to take down government? Because you start looking at the writing on the wall, and Andrew might now say, okay, I don't have a chance for my Green Party to be successful in the next election. And I'm just thinking hypothetically, obviously.
I agree with you.
But, you know, why would he chance taking down government right now? There is a good chance that the NDP could still form government when you look at the polls. And that would be because a lot of the Green supporters would go back to the NDP, the ones that were... because the Green Party, in all fairness, there's a lot of supporters out there, and there's a lot of people on very centrist that did not like the BC Liberals or the NDP and parked their vote there. it's all bets are off, I think, if we went to an election now on where a lot of those Green supporters who are disenfranchised would put their vote if they voted at all, which they should. So I think you're going to find a lot of these backroom discussions going on between the NDP and Greens saying, how do we ride this roller coaster a couple more turns? Because if we go to an election, it might hurt both of us. So you might see them maybe postponing the by-election, maybe doing things in the House that look a little silly so there's no votes, anything to prolong their stay.
Well, and they've got to be concerned. And I would have that concern sitting on that side of the table in the same pretense that, everything has changed since they, again, we'll quote unquote, stole power in order to lead the province. And we're sitting in a position now where basically it's a complete 360 from what it was 16 months ago. You guys have a new leader. You've come out stronger as far as your MLAs and as far as your community engagements. I mean, we've seen that here with this PR across the province. And then, like you said, we've got two other groups in government that have completely flip-flopped, which, some of the biggest comments I see on some of the stuff with John Horgan is, again, the people that followed him because he was against Sightseer, because he was against LNG. And you've got these hardcore, old school NDP supporters that have now gone, hey, I'm not going to vote for you. And I probably read about 35 of them in the last couple of days. And, my question would love to be, hey, well, then who are you going to vote for? Because where does that disenfranchised vote go? Does it go to the Liberals? They're not going to go to the Greens because the Greens have supported the same thing in the House. So there's going to be a ton of votes that I think are going to be available to be grabbed that have maybe never been on the market before.
Yeah, but we also can't kid ourselves, because there are a lot of those same old-time NDP supporters who are very thankful that they are in government. And are they happy with everything? No, absolutely not. But are they willing to risk being out of power, out of government? I'd be surprised. So there's a lot of, Dan sees them there too, a lot of MLAs in the House that are just foaming at the mouth because, this is the time, I'll say, 16 years of them being in opposition. Why would they risk an election to maybe lose all that after only 18 months or 2 years? So, that's got to be in the back of their heads as well.
For sure. Yeah, well, and I think it would be in the back of everybody's head, right, sitting down there.
No, definitely. And just as you were wrapping up in time already, my goodness, where's time gone? But, I'll tell you, if you thought 2017 was an interesting year, I think 2019 is going to be a real interesting year coming up.
I think it is too. I think we're poised for again some growth, and when I look at the aspect, and it's funny because I'll argue with people from the South often because the real estate market and the real estate industry really led the province through 2016, 2017, 2018. Economists are now saying we're going to go back to natural resources, whether that be lumber, oil, gas, whatever that is going to replace that, real estate industry from leading the market in 2019. So, there's going to be a fundamental shift, I think, on all sides for what we're expecting to happen in 2019 and 2020.
Which is going to be very difficult for the existing government. Premier Horgan, I've known him for a long time now, Dan has, and, behind the scenes, he actually is quite supportive of the resource sector. He's been very public on that when he was opposition. The challenge he has is over half of his MLAs and caucus are former protesters and activists against that. So he's trying to balance that as well. And so he's going to have a busy year. And I think for the media, I was talking to Keith Baldry, and he was telling me the last 2 years, and next year will be the same. The media stories, it's the craziest it's ever been for politics, and the stories just write themselves right now.
Well, yeah, especially in our province, and whether it's north to south, it's the same sort of stories that we're seeing. And honestly, in defense of the Premier, and I'm not defending him on many things, but the balancing act that he's going to have to pull off in 2019 is going to be tough.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big challenge.
It's going to be a big challenge. And I think that challenge is going to start with the by-election in Nanaimo. And no matter what happens from there, he has got a ton of work ahead of him to try to hold all this together.
And I think in all fairness, and Dan, I'm not sure I think you agree, we have just as much work to do too. And I said this last week, Trevor, that we're not perfect. We made some mistakes, and we have to do a lot of work on the ground to gain credibility and respect back from the people who left voting for the BC Liberals as well, because we lost that feeling. I used to say of we worked so hard on the economy to build the economy, but we forgot why we were doing it.
Yeah.
And that was to have the economy and resources to help people in the province and to have the services that we need and that we demand to have. And we need to do our work as well. It's not going to be easy, I think, for anybody. And Wilkinson has been working harder than anybody that I can see in our party, getting around the province and trying to kind of gain that credibility back for us as well.
Good. Well,
yeah, I completely agree with you, Mike. Completely agree.
And it was easy to see because I think that's what tipped the scale. So, that's a fantastic comment. I agree with you guys 100% on that. And we oftentimes are on the opposite end of the scale where, we're the resource-driven side of the province going, you know what, we need to have Site C, we need to have LNG, we need to have, rebates and credits and an active drilling program. And oftentimes ourselves in the north, we forget what those funds are supposed to be used for.
Well, one thing I'm looking forward to is the election in Alberta and the focus there, because as people know, our region also does well when Alberta's doing well.
Agreed, 100%.
And we need to make sure that they've got not only a government but policies in place, because if you think back just a couple of years ago with the amount of people in our region that were working in Fort McMurray in Alberta and bringing that money back into the Peace region to invest and spend with their families here. That's one of the challenges we have right now. We're seeing a lot of people from Alberta up in our area.
Yep.
So when Alberta does well, we all do well in this region. So I think that's going to be a big play in 2019 as well.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we're starting to see as well, and it's a great thing, is I think Canadians in general are fed up with with this whole anti-resource rhetoric that's being pushed out by these, the Tides Foundation, the Dogwood Initiative. These again, we know this is predominantly a lot of American oil money coming in to derail our own industry up here as that competitive edge away. And I think people have really noticed that. And, Mike says when Alberta does well, I think when we actually look at some of this proportional representation, the resounding result to keep where we're at, I think that's also some of those same people that are saying, we've had enough. And we understand that, a good, strong resource economy for the province of British Columbia is going to provide those benefits that we need, whether it's education or the social services or healthcare that we need. And we're seeing a lot of the Indigenous leaders now across British Columbia coming now and standing out in front of the camera saying, we support, a lot of this stuff. And I think it's all connected to this result that we just had on proportional representation of people are, finally saying we've had enough and we need to do what's best for the province.
I agree with you, and so does 66% of Quebec, apparently, when it comes to Energy East, because, as we now find out, it's not it's not the Premier's choice, it is not the Mayor's choice. There's 66% of people in Quebec that were polled that are in favor of Energy East, and I think that goes along exactly with what you were saying, and we're seeing it not only in our own province, we're seeing it across the country, which is beautiful.
I agree, 100%.
One of the things that I'm interested in watching when you talk about right across the country is how the federal election is going to play out. This is one of the first times in many years where provinces other than Quebec are out there visually, publicly protesting the federal government, who are out there, whether it's against carbon tax, whether it's against the energy policy, whether it's against immigration. It seems like one thing after another. Provinces are starting to stand up very loudly against the federal government. So I think we need to get to a point, too. Remember, we're one Canada. We're all Canadians, and sure, there's differences of opinion, but the way it's playing out federally right now is also probably, I would say, for a lot of people, shows some concern.
I agree. I have a countdown on my phone until the federal election. But guys, that's all we've got. We need to wrap up. Dave's getting a little bit nervous here. He wants to get on with his show. So I thank you both very much. I wish you guys a Merry Christmas. Stay safe. Dan, drive safe. Mike, keep on shuffling when you get bored coming up here and help me out. And you guys have a fantastic Christmas holiday with your families.
Thanks.
Right on. Merry Christmas to you guys as well. Happy New Year, all the residents as well. And good job to everybody in all of northeastern BC. Well done on this.
Agreed, and good job to you guys for making sure people were involved and well informed.
Thank you, thank you. Merry Christmas.
You too. Take care, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. So that is another episode.
You've been listening to Trev Talks.
That's our. Dave's really anxious to get this going, but that is our final Trev Talks for the year, and we will be back with you in the new year with a whole season and a whole assortment of new shows. We will see you soon. Bye.
You've been listening to Trev Talks, a weekly talk show about Fort St. John and the North Peace.
We all have that person, that one person on our Christmas list that we've run out of ideas for. Well, Bronze Flooring would love to help. As your Fort St. John flooring experts, Bronze Flooring can give you plenty of ideas for that special person this Christmas. How about a nice area rug for the front room? Or maybe a bronze gift certificate